Shabbat Shalom! Welcome back to the garden, Torah, where together we explore what it means to live out Kingdom of Heaven principles. I'm your host, Azaria, and I'm glad you decided to spend the next few minutes with me. Last week, we discussed how keeping Torah is for anyone who desires to draw near to YHWH. That naturally leads us to a follow-up question. Once we've decided to draw near, what does that relationship actually look like? In other words, what is worship? Growing up, I understood worship to be synonymous with singing, dancing, and prayer. In the non-denominational Protestant tradition that I grew up in, services often began with a time called praise and worship. Praise songs were upbeat with clapping, jumping, and dancing. Worship songs were slower, where people closed their eyes, lifted their hands as a sign of surrender, or they knelt down in prayer. Perhaps you conceptualize worship the same way. Singing, dancing, and prayer can be beautiful and artful expressions of how we adore YHWH. But I'm persuaded that worship has an even broader meaning that encompasses almost every other thing we do in life. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the word worship may be used either as a transitive verb or as a noun. A transitive verb is an action that requires something or someone to be on the receiving end of it. As a transitive verb, worship has two meanings. First, it means to honor or show reverence for as a divine being or supernatural power. Or secondly, it means to regard with great or extravagant respect, honor, or devotion. As a noun, worship has four meanings. First, it is reverence offered to a divine being or supernatural power in an act of expressing such reverence. Second, it is a form of religious practice with its creed and ritual. Third, it is extravagant respect or admiration for or devotion to an object of esteem. Or fourth, it is a person of importance used as a title for various officials, such as magistrates and some mayors. When looking at the English definition of the word worship, we can certainly see how song, dance, and prayer fit into the equation. They are methods of showing reverence for YHWH and methods of regarding him with extravagant respect, honor, and devotion. If we limit our understanding of worship to song, dance, and prayer, however, we miss the underlying theme that worship, in its fullness, includes how we live our lives as a whole. Worship is how we treat our families, our neighbors, and YHWH's creation all around us. How we treat and interact with YHWH's creation reveals our reverence or lack of reverence toward the Most High. To understand the full scope, let's look at the two Hebrew words that are typically translated into English as worship throughout the Tanakh: abad and Shachah. Abad, according to Strong's 5647, means to work or to serve. And Shachah, according to Strong's 7212, means to bow down or to prostrate. Shachah aligns the most with our modern classic understanding of worship, such as bowing down in prayer. But its use is not limited to worship in the way that we might understand it. In Genesis chapter 33, verse 3, Shachah is used when Jacob bows down to his brother to show him high respect. It is also used in Genesis chapter 37, verses 9 through 10, when Joseph has a dream that his parents and siblings would bow down to him in high respect. And we see it used again in Ruth chapter 2, verse 10, when Ruth bows to Boaz to show him thanks for his kindness. None of these scenarios depict idolatry, even though they demonstrate one person bowing down to another. While Shachah involves the literal action of bowing, abad is more dynamic. It can encompass any action, since work and service are broad categories of action instead of discrete action, such as bowing down. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 and verse 15, it encompasses the concept of tilling and cultivating the earth. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 through 14, it encompasses any work that may be done during the 6 work days of the week that are not permitted to be done on the Sabbath day. None of these scenarios depict idolatry, even though they describe general, ordinary work that does not seem directly related to YHWH. Abad and Shachah are not interchangeable, but they often appear together to form a more complete picture of worship. Because Bible translations vary, whenever you see the English translation of a verse, I will use serve or work whenever the Hebrew word abad is used, and bow down for whenever the Hebrew word shachah is used. Let's look at a few times where abad and shachah are used together to mean worship. In 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 31, it says, "And as though it were not enough to follow the sinful example of Jeroboam, he married Jezebel, the daughter of King Ethbaal of the Sidonians, and he began to serve Baal and bow down to him." In the NLT translation, both abad and shachah are consolidated into one neat phrase, to bow down and worship, when translated into English, even though both terms with their distinct meanings are preserved in the Hebrew. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19, we have, "And when you look up into the sky and see the sun, moon, and stars, all the forces of heaven, don't be seduced into bowing down to them and serving them. YHWH your God gave them to all the peoples of the earth." Again, we see that the NLT translation, both abad and shachah are consolidated into one phrase. This time, they were consolidated into the phrase worshiping when translated into English, even though both terms with their distinct meanings are preserved in the Hebrew. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 9. "You must not bow down to them or serve them, for I, YHWH your God, am a jealous God, who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods." Here, both terms are kept separate in the NLT translation, but the NLT decided to translate abad as to worship instead of preserving its distinct meaning to serve. Last week, we said keeping Torah is for anyone and everyone who wants to draw near to YHWH. After exploring with me today the meaning and use of the Hebrew words abad and shachah, I hope that you will agree that worship, our service, and our reverence is how we live as people who have decided to draw near to YHWH. Today, we explored acceptable instances where abad is not exclusive to the Most High. We also explored acceptable instances where shachah is not exclusive to the Most High. So what makes our abad and our shachah to YHWH unique? I believe that the uniqueness of our abad and shachah comes from our acknowledgement that YHWH is supreme in our lives. When we acknowledge his supremacy as king of all creation, we also acknowledge that his instructions are supreme, and we reject everything that goes against his instructions. And his instructions are his Torah. We refuse to deify anything and anyone above or alongside YHWH. We refuse to bow down to and serve idols. We refuse to partake in work that YHWH instructs us not to do. We refuse to serve someone or a cause that conflicts with YHWH's Torah. If you agree that worship encompasses how we live out our lives beyond the music, dancing, and prayers, let me know in the comments below by typing, "I worship YHWH by making his instructions supreme in my life." Thank you for joining me, and until next time, Shabbat Shalom.